All right, well, welcome to the Sports Guys, another episode. We're really happy you're joining our podcast. Just want to remind you, as always, please like this video and subscribe down below. Also, give us any comments of what you think of the podcast so far, any future topics you'd like us to cover. As you know, we're always trying to hook up with you guys and really talk about what you guys want to talk about, what you find interesting. So anyway, how you doing, Rob?
Doing great. Living the dream.
Excellent. I like that background behind you. As you guys can see this week in this episode, we're going to talk about the NFL. Those of us football fans are in mourning because we're in the off season, but there's still lots of good stuff to talk about. You know, we have the NFL Combine happening this week. You have the NFL Draft coming up, and we're going to be doing some really good draft episodes. So look for those in your feed. But today we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic. It's an article I saw on The Ringer, which is a sports website, and they actually have their own podcast too. But they wrote an article called the 2024 NFL Quarterback Commitment Index. They wrote it in a very similar fashion to the hot, crazy Matrix, if any of you have seen that viral video of the guy who's trying to explain women that you should pursue, women you shouldn't pursue, based on that Matrix. And so this commitment index between quarterback and NFL club is very much on the minds of all GMs at this time of year as they're trying to build their teams and get ready for the 2024 season. So it's going to be really fun to kind of go down this through this with you, Rob. It's a really funny article. I'm not sure we can capture how funny it is until you read it. But for those of you watching today, I will put a link to it down below in the comments. And then I'll also put a link to that other video that I mentioned, the Hot Crazy Matrix, which is also funny. So I think you guys will enjoy both. So you ready to go, Robbie?
Let's go.
All right. So beginning of the article, in a very funny way, just talks about how Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and Andy Reid have found kind of the perfect marriage. You know, they're like that perfect relationship that everybody sees and just feels sick because they're the ones who figured it out. Nobody else can. That everybody else in the league is pursuing that kind of level of perfection. So that's how the article starts, and it basically leads into the first category they mentioned in the article, which is icons, and icons being that iconic relationship that everyone admires. And in this category, there's only one quarterback and one team, and that's Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in that iconic category. What are your thoughts about that?
I think this whole article is very funny, the way they make parallels between real dating life and real marriage. Mm-hmm. That's the funniest part, is everybody can relate to each different level that they go through. And they start with the most functional marriage all the way down to the most dysfunctional breakups and all that stuff. So there's so many parallels in between here, between real dating, right. Whether it's online dating sites, references, all kinds of references to things we can all relate to, bad breakups, silly arguments, things that are not, compatibility issues, all kinds of real things in real life that relationships struggle with. And then they equate it to the football equation or equivalent of each quarterback and their coach, or each quarterback and their situation, whether it's talking about their contract. So really funny stuff. Starts out with a nice little segment on the Chiefs, and I think it's pretty right on. Obviously, Mahomes is the sets the bar for what every team in the league is looking for. That's that perfect husband or wife relationship, and all the other teams are chasing it, trying to find their version of that.
And I look at iconic as kind of those, not just the great marriage, but also the great marriage that lasts, for long periods of time. For a real marriage, it'd be 50 or 60 years. I know we had our great aunt and uncle who had that type of longevity. But I don't think you can really argue with the fact that this is the cream of the crop in the league right now, and what model everyone's trying to follow.
Yeah.
So Wouldn't you also agree that Belichick and Tom Brady had a similar relationship in
Oh,
a way?
very much so.
They got along all the time. They certainly had that kind of iconic relationship for, in effect, 20 years.
I think their magic was that they didn't always get along, and that it's well documented that Belichick used to treat Brady like he wasn't special. He would dress
Mhm.
him down in front of the team, and he would make everyone say, "Well, if he'll yell at Tom Brady like that, I
Mhm.
better watch myself because I'm not above that either," for sure.
Right.
So apparently, Belichick got a lot out of the guys by creating a little bit of a fear factor because he'd go right at Brady in front of everyone, and Brady realized what he was doing, so he didn't take it personally. Um, I think Mahomes and Reed couldn't be more different in that way, but I think they had a very similar magic chemistry that Belichick and Brady had.
No question. So coming on down to category 2 in the quarterback NFL matrix index is love at first sight. And there's two quarterbacks mentioned here. One is Houston Texans and CJ Stroud. Of course, Stroud didn't throw a pick for the first 6 weeks of the season.
Hey, Tom, I'm not sure you talked about right guy, wrong time yet.
Um, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. So right guy, wrong time. Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson. Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow. And Los Angeles Chargers and Justin Herbert. Question with all these guys is they're all very talented. They're premier quarterbacks. You would call them top 5, top 10. The question is with all these guys, are their teams around them constructed in a way to support them to their goal, which is to win a Super Bowl? And so is it in a right guy, wrong time situation for all of these clubs? What are your thoughts?
I think in each case, these guys got paid big, and they didn't quite have a Super Bowl contender around them yet. So they're not going to reach there while they have the salaries that they're paid. These four quarterbacks are all outstanding and could easily get into the Super Bowl level if they were to restructure their contracts and be a little more cap friendly so that their teams could go get some great players.
No doubt. I do find it amusing that they made that exact analogy. They basically said that each of these guys had extravagant weddings with their NFL clubs, meaning had the big contracts, the 50 million, 60 million a year situations, and in a lot of cases can't then afford to protect them, give them weapons, fill
Mm-hmm.
out the defense and everything else. So yeah, really, really good point about that. Anything else on the right guy, wrong time for these four guys?
I think another way to say what I'm saying is because their salaries are so large, $250 million in each case, um, there's a deficiency on their team that they can't address with money because they don't have access to money without exploding their cap.
Mm-hmm.
So something would have to change to put them on a more higher trajectory to the Super Bowl, I think. But all four of those guys could take a team that had talented players on it to the Super Bowl if they were able to address the weaknesses of the team. In
Mm-hmm.
each case, the Bills, the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Chargers all have different deficiencies. But in each case, they can't address them really.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they, the Chiefs addressed their defensive problems, but they let a lot go on offense.
No doubt.
So that's why they weren't as dominant this year, and they kind of struggled and limped their way in. But Mahomes was special in the Super Bowl. So, and that playoff run too, he had some good moments. But he was willing his team to the victory, even though he also has, in my opinion, too big of a contract. I think something's got to be done about these quarterbacks'
Mm-hmm.
salaries because I think they hurt their team when
Mm-hmm.
they come out of their rookie contract. They get paid huge, and then all these players need to be either cut from the team, traded, or they can't go crazy with bringing new guys in. They definitely can't go in the free agency market. So these four guys, there's that little bit off, and the article
Although,
talks about it in real terms.
although I will say that the salary cap was just increased again by 30 million per team per year. So now there's all this new cap room on top of whatever cap room you already had. So now they're talking about Dak Prescott might get as much as $60 million in his next contract. So the
Right.
money just
That
keeps
doesn't
going
make
up
sense.
and up and up. Yeah,
Imagine how good San Fran's going to be, because
right.
they're not paying Purdy for 2 more years.
True. So
So
that category ends by the discussion that basically until one of these four guys wins the Super Bowl, they're just going to be kind of secondary characters in the Patrick Mahomes love story. What are
their
your
biggest
thoughts about that?
their
And
biggest hope is what?
who do you think out of these four is going to actually break through? Which of these four guys would break through first? Do you think?
I'll tell you, I don't know the answer to that, but I will say it's the one who creates an environment where veterans will do what they did with New England, which is take a veteran pay cut to go try and get a ring. So if it's got to be the most likable one, the one that people want to play with, the best leader, the one that people are like, I want to go play with that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll take a pay cut to go get a shot at trying to get a ring with that guy. I don't know which one of those four is the most dynamic player that people want to play with. All of them are dynamic and all of them are special. But if I had to guess, I'd say I think if you look at the Los Angeles Chargers with Justin Herbert, and now they're bringing in a coach that players really love to play with, it could be the Chargers.
Yeah, it's possible for sure. I think the Chargers or the Buffalo Bills. I know that every year we say the Bills are going to break through, but I do think that they've got the team to do it. They need to figure out their wide receiver situation, but in the end, all of these teams have to go through Patrick Mahomes. So, who's most positioned to do that is the real question.
Yeah, I think
So
it comes down to what team creates the best environment for like a junior Seau going to New England for league minimum, pretty much, so he can try and get a ring. That kind of situation you want, because that's the only way you're going to overcome your cap problem and fill the holes that you have. Because all four of those teams have problems.
No, that's true. So next category we got is love at first sight. This is Houston, Texas, and C.J. Stroud and Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love. C.J. Stroud, of course, goes the first 6 weeks of the season with no interceptions, and then by week 8 breaks the all-time rookie passing record, including the most passing yards in a game, and then promptly leads his team to the playoffs, which nobody saw from a 2-15 team the year before. Certainly was the rookie of the year and was pretty amazing from the beginning. And then Jordan Love, in his third year in the league, but his first year starting, really was a rookie in terms of playing time and had a very similar path to the playoffs as well. What are your thoughts about the love at first sight category?
It's funny. I saw both of these coming pretty clearly before they happened. I had conversations with you in the draft that I thought Stroud was the better pick
Right.
for the Panthers.
You did.
I thought he was the most ready, most prepared. But I certainly did not see year one. I did not see that. So while I did think he was the guy, I did not think it was going to manifest this quickly. And then Love, I also saw coming. I picked him up pretty quickly on my fantasy team this year as a backup, and he became my guy. I rode for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to trust the way Green Bay develops quarterbacks. I just think it's the ideal way to do it. I would say if I changed anything in the way they developed Love, I probably would have gotten rid of Rodgers a year or two ago and gotten
I was going to
him
say, this
on the
really should
early
have been
part of his rookie contract instead of waiting until it expires. But
I agree. This should have been Love's second year. They kind of wasted a year of his rookie contract by holding on to Rodgers a little bit longer.
yeah, he sat for 3 years behind Rodgers. I think he should have sat for 1.5. And then they try to trade Rodgers midseason, or at least get 2 in, and then give him a shot. So,
Right. No doubt about
but I mean, he had 32 passing touchdowns. That was second in the NFL. So
it. No doubt.
pretty impressive.
So next category is ring shopping. So So those couples that are out there, they're in love. They know they want to get married. Maybe he hasn't quite popped the question yet or whatever, but they're actually ring shopping. And in this case, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. Pretty clear that the Jags have decided Trevor's their guy. He did take them to the playoffs in his second season. They had a little bit of a disappointing finish this year. They started 8-2 and then kind of faded, but pretty clear that he's one of at least the top 10 to 12 quarterbacks in the league, and that if they're going to have a long-term relationship with him, they need to put a ring on it. Any thoughts?
So I think they're still ironing the dysfunction out of Jacksonville that got sort of, I mean, they've had dysfunction there for the last, I don't know, 15 years or something. And then it got to its apex or crescendo under the coach. What was his name? The Ohio State coach, Urban Meyer. Terrible. And then getting rid of him and starting to let Trevor Lawrence have a better support system around him is going to take more than a year. But I think he's pointing in the right direction. I think they're definitely ring shopping for him, meaning he's going to get a big contract in the near future.
Right.
And also they're still building a team around him. Ironing the dysfunction out means that you have to just slowly get rid of the players that learned a lot of bad habits and were a part of a losing organization under Urban Meyer and saw a lot of things they shouldn't have. And to turn over your roster takes time.
I think Peterson is the right coach. I'm glad they went with him.
Yeah.
He's going to get things straightened out. My concern with them is that are they going to run out of time, because next year is the fourth year of his rookie deal, Lawrence, and after that,
that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem. But by the time they get it fixed, is it going to be too late? And then they're going to have to pay him $250 million, and then there's no chance of making the team better.
So they have one more year to build the foundation, essentially.
It's got to get better fast, really fast.
That's right. That's right. But it looks to me like they are going to go ahead and propose to Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. But I would say the majority of their improvements have to happen right now in terms of personnel. Their GM has got to be the MVP of this whole deal, because they're not that close right now, talent-wise. I'd say they're on the border of playoff contention in terms of talent level, but they're certainly not ready to take on the Ravens or the Chiefs or anything.
This next category is probably the funniest to me of all of them. It's promise ring shopping. Of course, you give a promise ring to a girlfriend or to someone you're going steady with. It's a pre-marriage commitment. It doesn't really represent anything other than you're committed to each other from a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. And the person
you feel really good about the direction of everything.
Yeah.
But you're not at a point where marriage is on the table.
That's right. And so the player here is Brock Purdy in the San Francisco 49ers. And, the category leads off with a funny comment, which is true, which is, Super Bowl losses can put a huge strain on the relationship. And until these two gentlemen find a way to break through and put a ring on their finger from a Super Bowl ring perspective, we might not know if Purdy really is the long-term guy or not. So what's your thoughts?
There's an interesting line in this article. It says Purdy is probably the cheapest competent starting quarterback in NFL history. And since he was the last pick in the draft, he might hold that title forever. And I think that's right.
That's true. Being Mr. Irrelevant.
Yep. He's made in his entire career what Dak makes every game.
I know. It's astounding to me.
It's just that's when you really had your window open.
Right.
The Niners have their window open, and even
His
though
cap hit was 889,000 last year. It's really unbelievable. So he clearly is the cheapest and best value. The question though is, what is he going to be able to do in the next year, 2 years to get himself to a level where Trevor Lawrence is and the other guys who are actually ring shopping for a long-term deal?
Well, I think he's better than Trevor Lawrence, but that's my personal opinion. But not by much. I like Trevor Lawrence as a player. I think he's pretty good. But I will say that there's nothing he can really do to speed up getting paid because the Niners know that their window is open and they need to go shopping. And they have some big contracts they need to deal with Ayuk and a few other guys.
Hmm.
They need to make really important decisions, and they know that they don't have to deal with Brock Purdy right now. They said they wanted to pay him, but they can't because they have to deal with other issues.
Right.
So, you know, he's this very productive quarterback who is not even close to the highest paid quarterback when compared with third string quarterbacks.
Hmm.
So,
Right.
they're in a special window that they have to take advantage of, and the only way you do that is if you keep as many stars as you can, and if you have to let one or two go, you replace them with some youth, so that you still have you're feeling good about the cap.
Yeah, no doubt
So
about it. Next category is the roughed first year of marriage. We've all known those couples that kind of, dated for 6 months, got married a little bit too early. Maybe wasn't a perfect fit, or maybe some life situation happened and they had that really rough first year, but they're still trying to hang in there. And the player in this category is Jalen Hurts in the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, last year, the year before, he had gone to the Super Bowl and lost to the Chiefs. This year, starting 10-1 and then falling off at the end of the season, and really a pretty precipitous decline. It really was pretty shocking to watch.
yeah,
And so the question is the Eagles now are scratching their heads, having signed him to his quarter billion contract, and pretty much mortgaged their next 5 to 6 years on him. What do you think they're thinking at this point?
I think they're trying to not have buyer's remorse, um, but I think they're in the process of having a decline because they they paid Hertz too much, I think, and they're not going to be able to keep the core together. When you lose Kelsey, whether it's this year or next year, um, you're just gonna be kind of whiffing in the dark without much ability to do much in the trade
Mm-hmm.
possibilities, and you don't want to draft a center as a rookie. I just think they're going to have holes that start springing leaks in their boat, and they're not going to be able to
Yeah.
to close them all. And I think a lot of it is Hertz's contract's too big.
Too big, and
His
also
output,
you
like,
said for a while that you thought Hertz was above average, but not by much. That just
yeah,
kind of he's just kind of good.
he's not a
Um,
difference maker.
Not a difference maker, and sometimes there's games where he just doesn't make the throws that you would expect him to.
Yeah,
Um, he's kind of a run first, pass second guy, or has been in the past. A little bit better than Cam Newton, I would say, but not much. And the question is, can a guy like that take you to the promised land? And that's what they're finding out.
I don't think so. I think they're in the middle of a decline downward, but um, I like him. I like the way he handled being benched at Alabama. I think he's handled himself well in Philadelphia. I just think they were too quick to anoint him as one of the top five quarterbacks. And I think
He's
that that's a tremendous mistake. I think it was a rough first year of marriage, but I think the second year is going to be worse.
I kind of agree with you. I will say though, just in his defense, it's not all him. Their defense has some of the most talent in the NFL. They've got like 4 first rounders on their defense, and they didn't play like it. They really were disappointing this year, and just cut up like Swiss cheese by everybody. So
They
they've
have
got a lot.
a lot of youth on defense, but they got really run on a lot. They gave up a lot of running yards, and I think those players gotta figure out how to be more stout against the run. They're all very dynamic pass rushers, but they were very lacking in being stout up front and trying to dominate at the line of scrimmage.
That's true. Yeah, I just think
And it
their
was
defense is almost more of a problem than their offense, really. But they've got problems all over the field, and they've got
I
this
think
highly paid
they
quarterback.
fell in love with Hurts's ability to squat 600 pounds, and they also um, underestimate that a lot of the problems they're having are because they had to let some good players like, Sanders go, and they're starting to let players go because of Hurts's salary. You know,
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
it's not his fault, but it kind of is because the money they're paying him should be spread out more across the team.
Sure.
Unless he's a difference maker like Mahomes, who can overcome three guys that he should have to pass to that he doesn't have. So he needs to make some really special plays.
This isn't an issue of them not having weapons. They've got good running backs. They've got good receivers.
And a good tight end.
A good tight end. So they're in decent shape on offense. They just were disappointing, and especially on defense. So
Their
we'll see.
offensive line is starting to get a little old, and it's not easy to replace that. They're just good enough to where they're not going to get good draft picks, and they can't afford to bring in veterans.
And they're basically bumping up against the cap already, so it's kind of there isn't a lot of room there for free agents.
So their advantage, they're in the NFC East, and that's an easy division to dominate, relatively speaking, because Dallas is always an enigma and confusing. And then the other two, Washington is a question mark and has been for a long time.
Right.
And then the Giants have been disappointing. So it's not too hard to get yourself into the playoffs. But when you get there, you realize that you're kind of a pretender.
It's true.
Now, granted, 2 years ago, they're in the Super Bowl. But I think that was very much true 2 years ago. They hadn't paid Hurts yet. And they hadn't had any attrition. Their offensive line was 2 years younger. And I feel like they were just a little bit of a better team. However, when they got to the Super Bowl, they realized their defense was overrated a little bit.
It's not just that. You have to remember who they played in the NFC Championship game, the San Francisco 49ers and Brock Purdy in his rookie season. And if he had been healthy in that game, 49ers might have won that game. So he basically got hurt in the first quarter. So
yeah.
Wasn't really
and then they couldn't decide what to do about quarterback. They were having McCaffrey take snaps, and it was a disaster. So they got through that easily, and they got kind of not beaten down in the Super Bowl, but clearly they weren't as good as the Chiefs. Anyway,
next category is renewing their vows. So we got Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott, and Detroit Lions and Jared Goff. These are two guys that have already had the big contract, or at least Dak has. Jared's had kind of a mid-level contract. Both of them, these teams feel like have earned it. I'm not sure about Dak. I don't think I would pay him $60 million a year. I just don't understand it. I don't even put him in the top 15 in the league. I know that Jerry really likes him. The fans really like him. He's a great guy. I don't have a problem with him as a person, but I just don't see him delivering a Super Bowl to that city. And why would you give him the most lucrative deal in the league and renew your vows with him?
Agreed. I think Dak is a good quarterback much of the time. I don't think he's good under pressure, and they're wildly overpaying him.
No question. And Jared Goff, I do think he's earned another contract. He played really, really well. I think Detroit's up and coming. He was solid. He had very few interceptions this year. He really ran that offense great. Nobody wanted to play the Detroit Lions. And I don't know how lucrative a deal he's going to get, but renewing their vows with Jared Goff makes sense to me. Detroit's on the up and up.
There's a funny line in this article. It says Detroit and Goff basically got together as a revenge hookup in 2021 after Matthew Stafford asked for the Lions' blessing to ditch them for Los Angeles. What initially seemed like a fling in Detroit is now something way deeper. Goff took the Lions to their first playoff win in decades and beat Stafford and the Rams to do it. Goff is in his final year of his contract, but he'll surely re-sign with the Lions. I just think it's a funny parallel that they make there, where it starts as a revenge hookup and then it ends up being something that's deeper and they actually fall for each other. So
it sounds like one of those funny rom-com movies, where the people do the revenge hookup because they both got broken up on and
burned, or
and then they fall in love and they end up getting married at the end of the movie, kind of thing.
It did feel like LA sending Goff to the Detroit Lions was a move that was mean-spirited kind of. And Goff just took that and
A
said,
little,
I'm gonna make the most of it. And Detroit fell in love with him, and it's just like it's a good match, you know. So I think
a
he's
little
gonna
bit.
get paid. I don't know about the top dollar, but he's probably worth more than Dak at this point.
A little bit, but you have to remember the Rams had gone to the Super Bowl 2 years before and had lost with Goff, and I
Mhm.
felt, McVay felt that he wasn't the guy and he wasn't going to get him over the top. Kind of like how I feel a lot of Philadelphia Eagle fans are feeling about Jalen Hurts right now.
Mhm.
Um, and so he made the bold move of let's go get Stafford while we can, while he's still got some prime years left. We've got Cooper Kupp, we've got all these great players, and let's see if we can make a big run for it. So they went all in on Stafford. I
Mhm.
don't think it was a
It's
bad
funny.
move necessarily.
It's funny you mention that because the next category is happy second marriage, and
Right,
Matthew Stafford is um, the main thrust of this part of the article.
right. And you see, it also leads it off in a funny way, but by saying this couple got together behind their previous partners' backs. So
Yeah,
it was like a cheating situation between the Rams and Stafford.
right.
Pretty funny. But what are your thoughts about happy second marriage? I mean, I think proof is in
It's a
the
good way.
pudding.
It's a really good way to look at it, actually. He was waning in Detroit. He was getting hurt a lot. He was losing a lot of his luster. It felt like the window was closing on him. There was a lot of talk about him being over the hill and retiring. Um, and when he got to LA, he got to say, "No, I've still got a lot in the tank, and I'm healthy, and I'm going to go for it." And he went on to win a Super Bowl, and then he uh, he had a little bit of a disappointing part of his season last year, but then he kind of came back strong and
Right.
looked rejuvenated. So,
That's right. He might have been the most surprising player this year, I thought, in 2023, 2024.
yeah,
Took the Rams to the playoffs. I thought the Rams had been on the slide for the last 2 years, and Matthew Stafford had kind of a resurgent year this year after being injured last year.
as it
Um,
says in the article, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL last year.
he was really good, really surprising too.
Certainly
So,
not on the verge of retiring.
so after a happy second marriage with Stafford, we've got New Year, New Me, which is the Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray, and the Indianapolis Colts and Anthony Richardson. Their rookie last year only played a couple games and was hurt. Kyler Murray also coming off a serious injury. So New Year, New Me, basically meaning that these two guys, the teams feel like are their guy, but haven't been able to really show it in a long time because they've been out for a long time with serious injury. What are your thoughts?
Well, these are two very different situations. So it's an interesting segment in the article because it's hard to tie these two together. But I will say that both they have less in common than they have uh, in common. So, but let's talk about the Cardinals, Kyler Murray. I think they're dressing him up to shop him. I think
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to show him off around town so that people will want to date him.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Right. I could
he
see
had a
that.
fantastic second half of the season. He really played well. I think they're not pleased with his work ethic there.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly, all the controversy about him having contract clauses that deal with watching film and stuff.
Right.
That's
Right.
that's embarrassing. You know, that's a straight indictment on your work ethic. And they had to walk that back and take it back out just because of the public outcry. Um, I think they're saying, look, let's make him look as good as possible so we can ship him out. That's
Mm-hmm.
my personal opinion. I don't think their whole goal is to build around him. I think they want to make the team as good as possible and then trade him and
Mm-hmm. I could
then
see
get a pick for him or something and then go get their guy. As for Indianapolis Colts and Anthony Richardson, it's a perfect example of how I'm not a biggest fan of playing rookies, quarterbacks. I think him getting hurt on a team that still has a bunch of needs, you throw a rookie quarterback in there and you're flirting with disaster.
No doubt.
He was very good when he played. His future is bright. I think he's definitely good. But the new year, new me part for him was coming off injury. Same with Kyler Murray, but Murray came back and played well. So the best Kyler Murray came out in the second half of the season, whereas Richardson got hurt and he's down for the count. He'll be back next year. I think he's the future in Indianapolis. I think it's tough when you play a rookie and you get him just wiped out. They'll come back, but you don't want to do that every year. So they
I
better get that situated.
completely agree with your analysis there. I think with Richardson, they spent a first-round pick on him. They got to play him. He's only a second-year player, only has a couple starts under his belt. He's essentially a rookie coming back in his second year. They know Gardner Minshew is not taking them anywhere. I mean, he's a decent backup. He's the kind of backup you'd like to have on any team, but Richardson's the guy, and they're going to just develop him over the next couple of years. They have really good coaching staff there. They have a great running back. They have actually some really good players, and they're just going to put everything they can around Richardson and let him develop. Whereas you're right about Murray. Murray does seem like he'd be a candidate for next season at the trade deadline, moving him to somebody who really needs a quarterback.
Yep.
He's
somebody who's desperate.
He's a diminutive guy. He's 5'10". He's really quick, but he's never, in my opinion, going to really take a team all the way, kind of thing. He
throws a nice ball, but he's not good enough to overcome his size problem.
He's a solid starter. He can win you some games, but if your goal is way above that, which is to go to the playoffs and make noise, I just don't see that as Kyler Murray.
I think Kyler Murray's been a coach's son his whole life, and I think he's always sort of dominated and not developed the kind of work ethic you need in the NFL to be those top tier guys. And he's paid like a top tier guy, which hurts his team. So,
well, that was the worst thing they did was they signed him up for a $45 million a year contract for 5 years.
Yeah,
gave him all this money, and he's very, like you said, he doesn't have the strong work ethic. They had to put a clause in his contract to not play video games so much during the season. He's injured all the time, and he shows these flashes of talent, though. I mean, he's very good when he plays. But
I tell you, the flashes he shows are as good as any in the league. I put him up against Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, as far as exciting plays, but there's not a lot of good that goes along with a few of his highlights. It's just he's not consistently good.
Are you taking Kyler Murray or are you taking Josh Allen?
Josh Allen.
Exactly. So, will be interesting though. Just to close this segment out. Kyler Murray could have Marvin Harrison Jr. next year. Apparently that's who Cardinals are targeting in the first round. So it'd be really interesting to see if it's a Kyler to Marvin Harrison Jr. combination.
I do think that would make sense.
This next category is going to really hurt your heart as a Miami Dolphin fan. It's called He's a Nice Guy. And this is the Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa. He's the nicest guy. He's so sweet. He does whatever the coach asks. He probably even picks up his coach coffee on weekends, brings him flowers or whatever. He's the sweet guy, but is he really the guy, meaning the long-term marriage, the long-term situation? And that's what the Dolphins are slowly finding out. What are your thoughts about your Dolphins?
Well, he's had one healthy year, and that's scary. Do I want to pay him $60 million a year? No. Do I think he's a good quarterback for the Dolphins? Yeah, and I'm not trying to get rid of him. I don't know what their options are really. Obviously, they don't have to pay him right now. They can franchise him.
I think that's likely what they're going to do is they're going to put the tag on him. He's going to get $36 million under the tag, which is still a lot of money, but
it's a lot. But you can sustain that.
You can sustain it.
They need to get rid of a few veterans and go younger in a few spots, and they'll be okay.
And maybe you try one more year with him, but bottom line is that for him to get the 5-year, $50 million a year, $250 million contract, he's got to show more than what he's shown.
I agree.
Does he do explosive plays? Yes, but is that him or is that his weapons? And that's really the question that I don't think anybody can answer at this point.
I think he learned a lot last year as the starter for the first time, healthy starter. So I think that's something you can actually build on and has value. I also think Mike McDaniel is his play caller. Well, he wasn't always the play caller, but he had a big hand in offensive play calls. And I think that he let him down quite a bit, especially in the big games. The play calling and the game plans were not good. And so I think we played right into the hands of the strengths of the opponents. And therefore Tua was not put in a good position.
Right.
I'd like to see McDaniel learn from some of his mistakes, watch what happened in the Super Bowl and a lot of the playoff runs of some of these teams. And going away from the run was tragic for a lot of the teams. Whether it was the Ravens going away from the run and they lost to the Chiefs and they probably should have won that game. But they ran the ball 6 times total. There's no excuse for it. And then the Niners running Christian McCaffrey 16 times during the game, that just wasn't enough. So, that's what
Right.
they did a lot to Tua was in big games, he's going to drop back on every play. And he took way too many shots in those big games. But when it was in a regular game, they had a balanced attack and they were pummeling people. They scored the 70 points earlier in the season, and they beat a lot of teams badly. So it really came down to a strange set of coaching decisions that put them on a path towards Tua's coming up short all the time in the big games. And so he looks kind of bad, but I don't think he's that bad. I think if their game plans were better for next year, they get to go back and watch some of those games, and I hope they get their own message. I think Tua will look more like a top-tier quarterback.
But it's interesting. The thing with Tua, the rub on him is that was it his arm or was it all his weapons? I think that if you really break down the tape, the complaint that a lot of the pundits, the Colin Cowherds of the world, have been saying about Tua for a while are true, and that is that he doesn't have a particularly strong arm. You have to run 15-yard and in type routes. The plays that are explosive between him and Tyreek Hill or others are typically like a 10 or 15-yard out, and the guy takes it the distance. Last year, when he was throwing over 25, 30 yards long bombs, he was often picked off because he has such a soft arm. And then on top of that, he doesn't scramble as well as the top 5 quarterbacks. He doesn't scramble as well as Josh Allen or even Joe Burrow. He gets trapped into the pocket and gets a lot of those sacks that some of those guys wouldn't have. So even Russell Wilson in his rookie and second year had that kind of escapability that I don't think Tua has. So I'm concerned about them with a long-term marriage with Tua. I don't know what you do about it, but
I'm concerned that the offensive line had some veterans on it, and 3 of the 5 spent most of the season hurt, especially in the games they lost, because Tua needs protection. And I think they need to actually let some of those veterans go and spend whatever you got in draft capital to address offensive line issues and linebacker issues. And I think if you do that, you'll see a better version of Tua, and the defense will look a little more stout.
Likely. Yep. So
but I'm not excited about paying him $60 million or anything like that.
No, I just don't think he deserves the money until he shows us he can go a little deeper in the playoffs and actually win the AFC East. I mean, it'd be nice if the Bills didn't win it one of these years.
Yeah.
Next category is married the nice guy. So Tua was, he's the nice guy, but now it's married the nice guy, and that's the Seahawks and Geno Smith, where they kind of committed to him for a couple of years. They gave him a pretty nice contract, close to $40 million a year for 3 years, because he made this great comeback in his year that he took over from Russell Wilson. I think he kind of came back to earth a little bit last year. It was pretty obvious that he had a lot of limitations, and the Seahawks lost a lot of close games last year, and in a lot of cases was because he didn't play as well as he did the year before. So, thoughts about married the nice guy?
I think the article refers to it as he may not be the answer, but he's a good bridge to what the future is. He's not the future, but So I think he kind of reminds me of, staying together for the kids kind of thing. Um, he's the bridge to the future. They had to pay him to keep him in place. It was a scary world without him because they had nobody, and they
Right.
were going to have to spend a fortune, either in draft capital or whatever to start over. I think they have some time now to target their future
Mhm.
quarterback, and so in that way, I think they probably did a good move, in getting something stable.
I look at it like, the other guy they had on the roster was Drew Lock, who had a lot of promise. But every time any of these teams, whether it's the Broncos or the Seahawks, looks at Drew Lock in a training camp situation, they end up concluding that he's a career backup. And
Yeah.
and that's what happened. They decided Geno was the much better option out of those two. I look at the same situation in Pittsburgh where they had Mason Rudolph on the roster and still do, and keep every year thinking he can make a run at the starting job, and then he disappoints them, and they end up going and drafting Kenny Pickett. So, same situation. Geno, like you said, I think he's more of a bridge quarterback for them for a couple of years, but I have to think one of these years they're going to go ahead and draft the future guy
Yeah,
and develop.
it should be pretty soon.
Yeah.
Let him learn behind Geno, and then and then you have a bright future.
Next category builds on top of that. Married the nice guy and now panicking inside. Which is very funny. That's the New York Giants and Daniel Jones. And the,
Mhm.
the section leads off with the fact that the Giants broke up with Hall of Famer Eli Manning and started dating a younger man in Daniel Jones. And by the way, it was interesting. The Mannings actually knew the Joneses, and Eli and Peyton actually knew Daniel Jones and kind of counseled
Mhm.
him a little bit on his draft process. So it was kind of interesting that they were friends with him, and then he ends up replacing Eli. But the Giants committed a very large contract to him over multiple years. They're basically stuck now um, with this guy, and it's pretty clear
Mhm.
that he's nothing but maybe you know from maybe the 20 to 15 area in terms of quarterbacks at the most. What are your thoughts about marrying the nice guy and panicking inside with Daniel Jones?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think they just need to start over because I don't think they've put enough quality players around him. I think that roster is so weak. It's incredible. And they try to cover it up by having a strong running back, but the offensive line is horrible. Um, there's so many holes on the deep. The roster is one of the worst in the NFL. I don't think it's fair to assess him with that level of support around him. Um, that being said, I'm not sure he's a starting quarterback in the NFL either. He's certainly not worth what he's being paid. 82 million over 2 seasons. So it's 41 million a year.
Right, that's
I,
right.
I don't I don't think he's quite worth that. So uh, I think they made a mistake.
The good news is that it is over 2 years and they're locked into him this year, but not after. And I think that, if I were them, I would go ahead and draft a quarterback this year, maybe second, third round.
Yeah.
Um, they've also got Tyrod Taylor, who, ironically, every time they started Tyrod last year, they either won the game or were very much in the game. So even
Yeah.
going into this season, I'd probably draft the young guy and I would make it an open competition. I don't care how much he's making. If Tyrod gives you the better chance to win, Dabold's job is on the line, and I'd go with Tyrod if he gives you the better chance to win, and then I would try to develop the young guy.
No question. I think
Nick,
their draft, they've just got to address so many needs. I don't know where you start, but I think
the
the
next,
funniest line, the funniest line in this part of the article was the lesson here: don't fall in love in a contract year,
that's right.
because they gave him a big extension after they almost gave up on him the first time around, and then he came back and played really well. They gave him an extension. He's been terrible ever since. So yeah, don't fall in love in a contract year. That's a funny way to look at it.
And this is why this article, I think, hits so well, because it shows you how difficult this job is. That teams and GMs are trying to find a way to marry a quarterback with a team to have the ultimate success. It's just so hard. Most
Mhm.
teams cannot get it right no matter what they try. Some of them, by the way, can't get it right over many decades. You have teams like the Chicago Bears that have been
Mhm.
trying to backfill, their Super Bowl winning quarterback in 1985 and have never done it. So it's next category is Anne from Arrested Development, who's the crazy chick on that show. Um, and that's New Orleans and Derek Carr. And basically, it's a very short segment. It basically says, him, why? Why would we go with him? Um, so, what are your thoughts here? The Derek Carr experiment in New Orleans did not come off the way they were hoping for.
No. I don't have a lot of thoughts on that. I think his career has been kind of an enigma. I think he is pretty good quarterback, pretty good leader, and I think if you're going to build around him, you had to have him go to a better team to start with. And I think New Orleans has a lot of problems.
I would say that the most surprised I was last year was that my Panthers and Bryce Young only won 2 games. I never would have predicted that. I didn't think Bryce Young would be an instant success like CJ Stroud was, but I did think he'd win 5 or 6. But probably the second most surprised I was how ineffective Carr and the Saints were. They were picked to win that division. It's a very weak division, and they just were kind of middling or average all year, and it was really surprising. I don't know if it's a coaching issue because I do think Carr has some talent, and I think that he was pretty good with the Raiders, and I really expected him to do pretty well with the Saints, who have a pretty good roster.
I think Michael Thomas started the year hurt. I think it really hurt uh, Carr's ability to establish good chemistry with him. But I think there are a lot of needs on that team that need to be addressed in the draft and free agency that they weren't able to get much done last year. I mean, they weren't terrible, but they weren't that competitive either. And they just have a lot of needs. I'm just trading. If I'm them, I'm trading down out of every pick in this draft, trying to get multiple picks.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Next category is catching feelings after a one night stand. This, of
Mhm.
course, goes to Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They signed him for a 1 year deal for $12 million, which is a complete bargain in today's NFL.
Mhm.
He was supposed to be the bridge quarterback until they could find their long-term solution. They had Kyle Trask on their roster, but they didn't feel like he was ready to play. Um, Baker had been bounced around from multiple team to multiple team, Panthers, Rams, um, and somehow comes into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and not only has a great season, but ends up winning that division, taking them to the playoffs, and really having a resurgent, career season.
Mhm.
With Dave Canales, by the way, who's his offensive coordinator at the time, who's now the Carolina Panthers' new coach. So, what are your thoughts about catching feelings after a one night stand?
Um, I think it was a pretty good gamble on their part, thinking that he could carry them for a year or two, because I think he wasn't really treated right when he went to the Panthers. I think he was brought in out of a desperate situation, and the week he signed, he was in the game, and you cannot do that to a quarterback. He was learning very quickly because he's actually probably the smartest quarterback in the league and has a photographic memory and can pick up plays at a light speed compared to other quarterbacks. Doesn't mean he's the best. Certainly not the best arm or anything like that, but a decent arm, decent leadership, and has a photographic memory and learns quickly. It's not surprising that given a full off season with a team and a playbook, that he's pretty good because he's a pretty good quarterback. He's not great and he's not bad. And so the Bucks still have a nice core from their Super Bowl run, and I think that they weren't that big a surprise to be pretty good in a bad division.
And you know what? Their offensive line played well. They had a good running game. They ran the ball a lot. They had Mike Evans, who's a great receiver,
Mhm.
and they had some nice weapons. And their defense is solid. So, like you said, in not a great division, it really gave them an advantage.
really
It's
helped them
interesting.
in that
It's interesting.
division.
It says here, it's funny. It says, they were catching fields after a one night stand, but technically he's a free agent now. So the
Yeah.
question is going to be, are they going to go out again on Saturday night, or are they going to break up, or are they never going to see each other again? So it's going to be really fun to see what Tampa does going into next year. I have to think they're going to pay him. I
I
don't
think
know
they're going to
what.
do a promise ring. They're going to give him a 2-year deal.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
So,
They're not giving him 35 million a year. It'll be,
no,
25 million probably in that range.
I don't think he's getting a long-term contract either.
Yeah, I agree. Next category is not really looking for anything serious right now. Those types of relationships where the chick's like, I'm not really looking for a relationship. I just want to have fun, kind of thing. This is the Tennessee Titans and Will Levis, who was their draft pick last year.
Mm-hmm.
They, of course, drafted him into a situation where they already had a starting quarterback and a guy on the bench in Malik Willis, neither of whom I think the Titans feel like is going to work out. So they ended up pressing Will Levis into the starting job pretty much the last 6 games of the year. Played pretty well most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
but ended up getting his coach fired. And there's a lot of turmoil there in Tennessee, including they might be losing Derrick Henry, who's also an unrestricted free agent. So what are your thoughts about this? Not looking for anything serious, and will Levis be able to develop in Tennessee?
I like Will Levis. I think the Panthers should have traded down and picked him instead of what they did. I think he's got potential. He's not guaranteed by any stretch. I think it's a bit of a mess in Tennessee right now. So I wouldn't wish upon him that he's the starter while there's a dumpster fire going on around you. But I think they're going to straighten out quite a bit and be a little better and a little steadier. I think that they had some problems with Vrabel. He was such a player's coach that he would end up getting in a lot of problem exchanges with GM and owner and
Yeah,
all that. So
right.
I think that it's kind of like Jacksonville. They need to keep working their way out of the dysfunction
Mm-hmm.
and see what they got, you know? I think
No question.
Will Levis is pretty good, but you don't want to throw him into a position where he's on a team that gets rid of Derrick Henry and doesn't replace him with some superstar. Like you
Yeah.
got to you got to bring him along slowly because he's going to just be in his second year. And
I
I don't.
watched him. I watched him twice last year. He's tall. He's big. He's lanky. He's got a gun of an arm. He can actually run better than I thought he could. He reminded me a lot of Josh Allen. He really did. He's 2 inches shorter than Josh Allen, but he has a lot of the similar skills. I think his career and really every one of these guys' careers is going to be hinging on coaching, offensive coordinators, quarterback coach. Will Levis has got to have better coaching at all of those positions to really flourish in this league. He's going to have a pretty bad team next year, but that doesn't mean he can't still develop. And I think he's got a chance.
They say that the most important part of the draft is where you're going and what your situation is going to be when you get there. And so
Right.
I don't think he could have gone to a worse situation. Um,
Probably.
if he had gone somewhere more steady and somewhere that could bring him along slowly, I think he'd probably be in the Pro Bowl one day, but I don't know.
That's true. Next category is maybe the funniest and saddest for me. As you see, I got my Carolina Panthers on here, and that is lied about his height on Hinge, and his first date was a disaster. And of course, that's Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. And the line that opens that segment is really funny. It says Panthers owner David Tepper is stewing and swearing that he got catfished when he chose Young over C.J. Stroud. So, what are your thoughts about this potential marriage trying to get things back on track?
Well, I think it was incredibly unfair to go up in the draft, give away a bunch of picks, and grab a diminutive small quarterback as a rookie and then start him. Like, I just think the Panthers couldn't have done any more wrong things in that exchange. They could have stayed put or gone downward, gotten more picks. And they've been trying to ship off Brian Burns, more mistakes, because
Well,
I don't think they do anything
they
good
should have
with it.
taken Stroud. Should have taken Stroud. But if you're not going to take Stroud and you are going to take Bryce Young, you should have started Andy Dalton all season and let Young hold the
Pretty much.
clipboard. He wasn't ready. And also,
He
you didn't
wasn't
have
ready,
a
but
team that was ready for him.
the problem is they gave away picks that he needs this year to surround him with talented players so that he could get a Marvin Harrison, or he needs guys. And they shipped out DJ Moore. Their offensive line took steps backwards in talent level. They got rid of Christian McCaffrey. They've moved talent out and not gotten that many picks back for it.
And
And
they maybe have the
and
worst
all
receiving
these
core in
picks
the
to go
NFL.
get a guy who's just the same as all the other guys, not special, you know?
They might have the worst weapons in the NFL too. So now you're asking a rookie quarterback to come
Yeah.
in who's already diminutive and can barely see over the line if he can at all. And now you're giving him Adam Thielen and a bunch of guys. Nobody seemed to stand out last year.
Yeah.
Um,
And he's
even
not
even
special. And CJ Stroud looks like he's special. It looks like it.
even Hayden
So,
Hurst, who we thought would be a decent tight end, was disappointing. You had DJ Chark, who played maybe half the games but didn't do much.
and he had a lot of drops.
Yep,
Sure.
you had Terrence Marshall, who they had drafted 2 years before. Every year they keep thinking he's going to arrive, and he never does. And so, yeah, I really wonder what the direction is going to be here. I am encouraged by the hiring of Canales after seeing what he did with both Mayfield and Geno Smith. 2 years in a row, he resurrected two careers. So he's being asked to resurrect a third quarterback in his second season, and hoping Canales can get them back on track.
Mm-hmm.
Next topic is toxic long distance relationship. This is the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers. And basically, it leads off with, have you ever seen any of your friends who are slowly drawn into a toxic relationship and can't get out of it, or basically trapped in that situation? What are your thoughts about the Jets and Rodgers? Are they going to be able to make anything of that partnership?
No. They spent too much money on him. He gave some of it back and wanted kudos for that. They were wildly overrated as a squad all year. Their offensive line was terrible. I knew he was in trouble way before it happened because his offensive line's terrible and he has no chance of being Aaron Rodgers. So that team is doomed until they have enough money to use to go get offensive linemen and all this stuff. And then you add in all the weird stuff he brings in, where he is very much an attention seeker.
He's
Um,
very eclectic for sure.
and he's a weird guy, doesn't really fit in the locker room. So he brings his own guys in to help him fit in. But then when he's hurt after 4 plays into the season, his guys are all outcasts and weirdos in the locker room because nobody knows these guys. They're just here. And it just wasn't a fit. It's not probably going to be a fit. I think his best days are behind him. He left an organization that does a really good job of developing quarterbacks,
Mm-hmm.
the Packers, and he's with a dysfunctional organization that doesn't know how to say no to players and lets players run wild in the Big Apple. It just doesn't make sense.
I think it also talks about the toxic long distance relationship because Aaron Rodgers has a tendency to jet off to Hawaii and California and all these places. He doesn't really hang with the guys.
Yeah.
He even sometimes will travel separately from the team to games and things, and just doesn't do a lot of things to do team camaraderie. Although he was on that ESPN show with the rest of the team, and some of the players were saying that they really do like playing with him. So I don't know
I
what the
think the players
situation is.
like him,
Yeah.
but apparently he did his rehab elsewhere outside the facility, not with the team, so they could see him working. I just think I think it it was a doomed effort from the beginning.
No doubt. So next category is maybe should have looked beyond the boy next door. And this is the Steelers and Kenny Pickett. They felt like that'd be a marriage made in heaven. He was one of the better quarterbacks coming out of that year, coming out of the ACC, and he went to University of Pittsburgh, so he just stayed home. He actually played in that stadium before. They felt that it would be a comfort level. Hometown kid coming to the Steelers and resurrecting that franchise who have been looking for their guy after Big Ben retired. But now there's some real doubt on whether Kenny Pickett's really going to be able to make himself into a starter, and maybe he's a career backup.
Well, I mean, I think it's too simplistic to say that they picked him because he was a hometown kid and didn't have promising attributes. I think that they have a lot of problems. The Steelers have a lot of problems, but they win in a bad division because this year Burrow got hurt and Cleveland's Cleveland. So they were able to get enough wins to keep Tomlin's streak alive and all that, but they're not a very talented team. They're very limited in their ability to.
I think that's some of it. I think that's
What's
some
that?
of it. But I think that's some of it. But if you really look into some of these stats that they put in here, it's pretty damning. I mean, and I like Kenny Pickett, but I mean, if you put it into this context about, Joe Flacco had as many touchdown passes in 5 games as Pickett had in 2 seasons of starting. That's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And then Tommy
Flacco
DeVito
had a more talented roster around him, and I think that very much impacts some of the numbers.
Yeah, but Tommy DeVito didn't. Tommy DeVito's for the Giants, and he had more multi-touchdown games in 2023 than Pickett had in 2 seasons. You know what I mean? And he only played like 3 games.
Fair enough. But I think it's too early to say that Pickett's a bust. I think his team is a bust. I think the way the Steelers are constructed is not very good. I mean, Najee Harris should be in the Pro Bowl every year.
Do you think Pickett could be a starter?
Yes.
You've had 2 seasons to watch.
Possibly. Yeah. I still think it's too early. I don't think the offensive line's good enough. I think the defense has holes. I think the whole squad has holes. And they have an overrated passing attack with what's his name? The wide receiver, George. They have a really good wide receiver and then not much else.
George Pickett. Mm-hmm. Well, here's the most damning stat of all, that there's 315 quarterbacks since the merger have thrown 500 passes or more. And that if you look at the ratio of touchdowns per throw, he ranks dead last of every quarterback who's thrown at least 500 passes in that era.
I don't like their offense at all. I don't like the way it's built. I don't like their personnel. I don't like their play calling. I think it's time for Tomlin actually to move on.
It may be, or bring on a big time offensive coordinator, somebody you can really.
No question. If you leave Tomlin in place, because he's done a very nice job, he's one of the better coaches in the league. Yeah. I think he's just maxed out with what he can do. And this is the least talented Steeler team I can remember in a long time.
No doubt about it. So next one is ugly divorce. We have the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson. To say that last year was a disappointment, and really the year before, it's actually been 2 years of Russell Wilson in Denver, have been way below his standards and way below what any of us thought was possible in terms of just pure ineptitude. But really way worse this past year, where Sean Payton, one of the better coaches in the league, just got so frustrated where he actually ended up having to bench him the last part of the year. And you're looking at a $45 million a year quarterback who's won a Super Bowl and been to multiple Pro Bowls. So it's a really weird situation that Denver finds themselves in, to the point where they're thinking about even just outright cutting him this year instead of trading him. So any thoughts about this ugly divorce situation?
There's a lot of dysfunction in Denver that I think is partly caused by the coach isn't off to a very good start, and he wasn't a good fit with Wilson. I think you got to start over to let Peyton have his guy that he believes in,
Right,
and kind of let him build it his way. Peyton's trying to cook with ingredients he didn't choose,
right.
and I don't know. It just seems like
Although
it didn't work.
although there was a reason why the Seahawks gave up on him too. It feels like he's been slowly sliding. I mean, I like Russell
Yeah.
Wilson,
Well, I
but
think
he doesn't look the
he
same. He doesn't look the
no,
same.
I agree. I think he always was special because he could run around. He was never going to run on the defense, but he was going to run around to keep the play alive long enough for Lockett to get open or somebody to get open. He was able to keep the drives alive. It seems like he's lost a step and no longer able to really do that. And so when the pocket's collapsing, he doesn't shoot out the side and give
Yeah,
his guy
and
time to run alongside him.
and he always had awesome
He's
arm
taken down.
strength. You know, when he could throw to the DK Metcalfs of the world, he had great arm strength, but his arm strength's fading too. He had a lot of kind of weak arm throws this year that got picked. Um,
Yeah.
I saw an interview with Sean Payton about 2 weeks after the season was over with Colin Cowherd, and he basically said he didn't come out and say Russell Wilson, but he said in effect that the personnel we had this year, that was his way of getting around it. The
Hmm.
personnel that we had this year, we can't run my offense. So that tells
I
me
believe that.
there's no doubt that there's a change coming, and I have to think Russell Wilson's going to be on a different team next year,
Yep.
and they're going to let Sean Payton go get his guy, and
That's my point. Yes.
yeah, yeah, he's going to want a big, strong arm guy who can make all the throws. So next category is quiet quitting the relationships. So these teams haven't told their quarterbacks they're breaking up yet. So they're clandestinely kind of planning the way they're going to do the breakup. They're doing it in a very sneaky way. That's the Atlanta Falcons with Desmond Ridder, the Patriots with Mac Jones, the Raiders with Aiden O'Connell, the Commanders with Sam Howell, and the Bears with Justin Fields. So, in other words, all five of those teams have decided those five guys are not their guy. In a lot of those cases, they've got new coaches coming in, and not as toxic as the Russell Wilson situation, but the writing's on the wall that all those guys are going to make changes and go with new quarterbacks. What are your thoughts?
I think Justin Fields is going to stay in Chicago. But the other guys I think are Sam Howell will probably stay there, but lose his starting job to Caleb Williams probably. And then the other three are definitely gone. And I think Washington Commanders are moving too quickly to not give Howell a real chance. I think they have a lot of holes they need to address. They traded away most of their good defensive players, and their offense was always weak. So they need a rebuild, a complete rebuild. I don't think you burn a first round pick when you're at this rebuild level on a quarterback. I think you trade down and get as many picks as you can, and you start to fill gaps with starters. And then in the future year or two, you start to think about your quarterback. But it's too early. They're going to break Caleb Williams in half because they can't protect him, and then he's going to be a bust, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true. What about some of these other guys? I mean, Sam Howell, do you feel like he really got a good chance at
No,
starting? I mean, I feel like he was with a team that was completely dysfunctional
no.
last year.
I
Mac,
think he
Mac
needs.
Jones. I mean, I do think the Patriots need a new start. I mean, Mac Jones has been
Yeah.
disappointing for sure.
Uh huh.
Las
Ritter.
Vegas Raiders and Aiden O'Connell. I think O'Connell had some nice bright spots last year, but when I watch him, I don't think he's a starter. It just doesn't look like it to me.
Yeah,
Um,
O'Connell is 26 years old, so it's not like he's gonna get a lot better.
mhm.
I think he's just a good backup, and they don't have their guy.
I think the Atlanta Falcons are going to end up with either Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins. I think they're going to sign a veteran as a bridge for a while. I
Hmm.
think the Patriots are going to draft somebody. They feel like they missed on Mac Jones. Um, the Las Vegas Raiders with Aiden O'Connell and Jimmy Garoppolo feel like they don't have their guy. So I don't know if they're going to try to sign somebody or draft somebody, but clearly they're looking. They're in the market, I guess you could say. They're ready to mingle. Commanders have their new coaching staff coming in, and it seems clear to me that they want to keep Sam Howell, but he may end up being the backup, and that they're going to end up getting one of these stud rookie guys coming in. And then Justin Fields, I think it's probably 50-50 that they're either going to keep him, or if they decide to go with Caleb Williams, they'll get rid of him. So, you might see Justin Fields in Atlanta, maybe. You never know.
I think that would be a huge mistake, because what they'll do is they'll trade him for a low value, burn their number one pick on Caleb Williams probably, or somebody else, one of those top three guys, and have the same problem they have right now, which is nobody to help Justin Fields, nobody to help Caleb Williams.
Right.
And so you don't make those moves. That's what the Panthers did. You don't bring in a rookie quarterback and have no help for him. You pick Marvin Harrison, and then you try and get somebody like a Brock Bowers, or you get weapons, either free agency or picks, and you try to build. And then you do offensive linemen. And you pick one side of the ball to do most of your improving
Right.
on this year, and the next year you do the opposite. And you're rebuilding,
And sign yourself a veteran quarterback.
Yeah, get a veteran quarterback on the market, and you give weapons to Fields, and you give linemen to Fields.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then you ride with the defense kind of the way it is. You try and tweak it, you can't, a little bit, and you try to outscore people, and keep identifying good young players on defense. And then next year you go get picks for your defense, and it's not that complicated, really. It's rebuilding. You don't rebuild with a rookie quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. You build, and then you go get your rookie quarterback in his rookie deal, and you sit him for 1 year, and then you have 4 more years where you can franchise him in his 5th year. You have 4-year window to win the Super Bowl.
Right. Well, our last category of this very entertaining article is the "you don't want to be out here" category. Meaning, basically, this person should just retire from dating altogether. And that is Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. And the segment basically leads off with the Vikings are a very young team. They've been slowly building through the draft the last 3 seasons. And they're stuck with this guy in his late 30s who is good, but it's pretty clear that in prime time he doesn't deliver. When what they really need to do, it says here, their biological clock is starting to tick, meaning that they want to have kids, want to have a family. And they need to go ahead and draft their young guy and develop him and bring him along with this young team. So that's basically what they're saying.
Probably should have done that last year and let Cousins kind of mentor him. But I don't know. Minnesota is an interesting team. They're not dysfunctional, but they always disappoint.
Yeah.
And they also always have some really nice upsets. So
they do have a nice young roster. They've got Addison, who was the second in the Rookie of the Year,
and Jefferson,
his crowd last year, and then they got Justin Jefferson, and they've got a lot of nice pieces. They really do. And they almost feel like a quarterback away. Maybe not quite, but almost. So they should go ahead and draft.
They need one good draft and then get your quarterback.
And Cousins wants $50 million a year, and it just wouldn't make any sense for their franchise right now to do that. No. So that was an entertaining article. I think we went through all 32 teams. So to wrap it up, who do you think is going to flash the most of all the quarterbacks we talked about this year? Maybe somebody who kind of surprised some people.
Justin Herbert is going to reclaim his status. And I think don't know. I think Miami's going to be better. I think McDaniel's going to learn a lot. So I think Tua haters will be surprised at how he looks better.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot depends on this draft. Our
That's
team's
true.
going to do dumb stuff like trade their whole future to go get a bust of a quarterback. That
I
sends
like.
that team spiraling for years.
I think for me, it's. I agree with you on Justin Herbert. I think he's the guy to watch because of the coach he has now, and he's motivated. He's coming up on his 5th year. Um, and then I think a rookie to watch. This is just my prediction. Is Bo Nix? I think he's going to go kind of late first round, early second round, and I think whoever gets him is going to kind of have the steal of the draft. He he's really pro ready, and he won't have the pressure that the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks have. He probably won't end up starting the first half of the season. He'll come in late in the season, and I think he might surprise some people. I think Bo Nix is going to be a really good pro. So watch for him, and maybe even J.J. McCarthy. I know that Jim Harbaugh's very high on him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some teams that really like him at like 8, 9, or 10, somewhere in there. So J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, some of those guys who are not in the top 4 prospects.
I think generally the rookie quarterbacks are not going to stand out. As usual, they're going to disappoint. They're going to get injured because they're going to bad teams that can't protect them. Richardson might come back and do a really good job.
Yeah.
He's learning the hard way about getting down, not taking hits, playing behind an offensive line that actually has a lot of talent on it. But
But
I
I
just
think
think,
we can agree that the C.J. Stroud was an anomaly. I mean, he really was.
yeah, oh yeah,
Kind of the exception, not the rule.
I think
And
out
then
of
Jordan Love was in that same category, but really he had
no,
3 seasons to mature and to really
yeah,
learn the playbook.
he had 3 seasons behind Aaron Rodgers. That's not an anomaly.
Yeah, that's right. So really good stuff. Well, thank you so much,
Mhm.
Robbie, and thanks to everyone
Yeah.
for this episode. We really enjoyed this article. I hope all of you enjoyed it too. We're really excited to start preparing for the NFL draft and the analysis there, and we'll be watching all these quarterbacks and rookies as they come in. So thanks everybody for this podcast and being part of this episode.
All right.
Have a great one.